2. Got it? All right, Song of Solomon, chapter number 1, verse number 2. We're going to look at verses 2 through 7 this morning. That's my plan. And 2 through 7. Starting at verse 2. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. Because, verse 3, because the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as an ointment poured forth, therefore do the virgins love thee. Draw me, we will run after thee. The king hath brought me into his chambers. We will be glad and rejoice in thee. We will remember thy love more than wine. The upright love thee. Now this is, right off the bat, this is verses 2 through 7 here. Is the Shulamite's very first confession of love, okay, to her shepherd. It's interesting because we're giving a place, okay, because she says she's been drawn into the king's chambers, right? So I believe this is written from the perspective of she is sitting there, okay, inside the king's chambers. So the events that she will describe later on of seeing Solomon come and, you know, his entourage and everything, I think is more she's reflecting back on how she got herself, how she's in this situation. I think a lot of this is going to be her recounting of things. She is in the seat of power, okay, the seat of pleasure, okay, and she is facing this temptation. And here's how she reacts to it. She reacts to it by confessing her love for her shepherd, okay. So she goes on and she expresses this desire and her ardent wishes for some fresh discovery of the love of her shepherd, okay. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. So she's making this request. She's sitting in here with all of Solomon's glory around her, okay? All the opportunities that await her if she just forsakes the shepherd and succumbs to Solomon's temptations, okay? And how do I know Solomon is not the shepherd here? Well, because we're going to see as we read down through here, okay? She's sitting in the king's chambers, but eventually she's going to ask for the shepherd to tell her where he is. Well, then Solomon can't be the shepherd. And if she's looking for the shepherd somewhere else, if she's sitting there in front of Solomon and going, where's my shepherd? Well, then she realizes the shepherd wasn't Solomon in disguise. He's something completely different. And let's not forget what we talked about last week. Solomon was not a man of great moral character when it came to things like this. Okay? But neither was his father David. Okay? Remember, David committed adultery and then had the husband killed to cover it up. I'm not a very moral man. And then think about some of Solomon's brothers. Not much better. Think of Absalom. When Absalom took over the kingdom, what did he do? He took some of David's concubines, took them up on the roof of the palace, and had his way with them in front of the people. Not a very good man. His other brother, Amnon, raped his own sister and then cast her out. Okay? And then you got Solomon, who ends up with 1,000 women at his disposal. So, not a very moral man, not from a very moral family. Okay? And don't think God didn't take notice of these immoralities. He most certainly did. He didn't excuse them. Okay? He punished David. He punished Absalom. He punished Amnon. And he's going to punish Solomon. So just because, and this is a great lesson to learn, just because God lets you get away with it for a period of time. Okay? Doesn't Peter tell us that? Because the long suffering of God, people think that it's okay, that God's not going to judge because he's long suffering. This is the mistake people make when they make that. Well, the God of the Old Testament is different than the God of the New Testament. The God of the Old Testament is wrath and war, and the God of the New Testament is love, mercy, and grace. No, he's just very long suffering because he's already said how he's going to take care of everything. It's called the tribulation period. And that's judgment like the world has never seen or will see again. So he's the same God. He's just being very long suffering. And just because God is long suffering of something doesn't mean that God approves of it. My dad used to have an expression, give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves. And I really think God operates in most like that. But I think it's more that God's hoping they'll get right. They'll self-correct. I had a conversation with an attorney one time. And I was in the middle of a situation and discovered that something had been done wrong, legally speaking. And so I corrected it. Okay, I fixed everything. Okay. Funnily enough, I fixed it before I talked to an attorney. And then finally I talked to an attorney and told the attorney what I had done. Here's what I have found. Here's what I have done. Now, how big of a mess am I in? And the attorney says, no. You fixed it. That is exactly what you needed to do. And the state usually, when you self-correct, then the state doesn't bother charging anybody or doing anything because you self-corrected. You identified your problem. You fixed your problem on your own. You're not going to hear anything from the state. You're not going to hear anything from authorities. You fixed the problem on your own. And I think sometimes that's exactly what God wants. He's hoping that we'll identify our errors and we will self-correct so that he doesn't have to come through and do some kind of major correction in our world. He's really hoping that we will respond to that still small voice of the Holy Spirit, that conviction, before he has to turn around and chastise us and correct us on a grander scale. Okay? Unfortunately, in David's life, it took the grand scale. He had to lose the death of his firstborn child with Bathsheba. He had to lose his kingdom for a temporary period of time to his son Absalom. These were all judgments that God let happen because of David's immorality. And David's, not just the fact that he took another man's wife and he lay with her and got her pregnant, but he killed the husband as a means to covering it up. Now, David's redeeming quality is that when God sent the man of God to him, and gave him the little story about the sheep, the little lamb, and then looked at him and said, "Thou art the man." David ran to the altar, wrote beautiful Psalm 51, and had a broken spirit and a contrite heart. And God looked down and said, okay, but, because this is what God said, okay, I was going to kill you. It's what the man of God said, God was going to kill you for what you did. But since you've repented, since you're contrite, then God's not going to kill you. However, because the heathen will use this to blaspheme God, God's going to have to correct you publicly. So the heathen realize, though you're capable of this, God is not. And sometimes it's exactly why God will let trials and tribulations come into our lives. You say, well, I thought God was merciful. He is. But understand this, he's not going to give occasion for the heathen to blaspheme. Okay, God is going to, listen to me now, God's going to protect his own reputation. Okay, we just have to swallow our pride and realize that. He's good. He's holy. Okay, us, me, but he's good and he's holy and he will protect his own reputation. Okay, and it's just the reality of life. Where she's sitting here, this Shulamite. She's so in love with her. She's sitting in the opulence of Solomon's halls. And yet, what is she longing for? She's, rather than all the pleasures she could enjoy around her with the wealth of Solomon, you know what she wants? Rather, she wants the shepherd. She would trade everything Solomon is offering for a kiss from her shepherd husband. Isn't that amazing? Again, this is not meant to be a punch list on how to have a good marriage. This is just showing us a couple. They're not perfect. Okay, they're going to do some crazy things in here. But at the same time, that intensity of devotion, especially that is displayed by the Shulamite in these amazingly difficult situations, difficult and strained and strenuous on her marriage vows because Solomon wants her. Okay. You say, but she's already married. Didn't stop his father David. He is the king, you know. Okay. He could do exactly as David did and just have the shepherd boy killed and take her if he wants her. How hard would it be for the king to have a shepherd executed somewhere? Okay. If David can do it to a general, such a public figure, okay, and actually get his other generals to conspire with him, remember how he did it? I want you to take him to the front of the hottest battle. I want you to push him to the front lines, and then I want you to pull everybody back but him. Now, that's a very publicly orchestrated assassination, right? And there were letters that went back and forth. There was a letter that sent, he gave it to Uriah to carry to the guy that was going to have to execute the orders. He carried his own execution papers, had no idea what was in them. And Uriah was such a loyal man that he didn't even open them to see what they were about. And yet they were his death warrant. Can you imagine? And I mean, sometimes I put myself in these characters' positions and wonder who these people are. Because this guy opens up, reads it, Uriah's standing there. And it's Uriah's execution warrant. There's no crime. He's not accused of doing anything. He's just told, this guy, this general, maybe they're not really general, I don't know what their ranks are, I'm just using it. But this general is reading the execution warrant of the guy in front of him, one of his best soldiers, one of his best lieutenants, captains, I don't know what he was, in front of him. There is no charge of treason, disloyalty, or crime. It's just an order from the king to kill him. Don't tell me that Solomon couldn't do the same thing to a shepherd. So the fact, well, she's married, that doesn't mean nothing to David's family. Nothing at all. Okay? Remember, he married Michal, David did. I'm really trashing the Davidic line here. But in this area, they were horrible. Okay? He married Michal, then forsook her. Saul married her off to somebody else. David comes back into power, and what does he want? Michal. She's my friend. Get her back over here. Even though she was married to someone else, and the guy was just like a little puppy following her along, you know, because David just took his wife. And they basically tell him, you know what, this is David. You better just go on home. You know what they're telling him? You push this, buddy, and David will just have your throat slit someplace. So we suggest you just go on home. Yeah, I realize he just busted up your marriage. He forsook this woman. He busted up your marriage to her. And now he's taken her. This is what David was like. Can I just be honest with you here? This is what David was like. Then he's a bigamist. He had multiple wives on top of that, right? This is what David was like. This is what his sons were like. The ones that are named and mentioned. Okay? Especially the guy who's the key character here. So don't think that because the Shulamite was married to the shepherd that this bothered Solomon at all. His family was well known for this kind of activity. So, big deal. He saw her. He wanted her. So he had her brought to his chambers. She's in the chambers. And this is what I don't think Solomon expected. That she started talking about her shepherd. And her desire to have her shepherd express his love to her. Isn't that amazing? You'd think she'd just shut up. But not this Shulamite. Not her. Nuh-uh. She wants kisses of the mouth of her shepherd. She says that because of the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as an ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. Draw me, we will run after thee. The king hath brought me into his chambers. We will be glad and rejoice in thee. We will remember thy love more than wine. The upright love thee. Oh my goodness, you know what she's doing? She's basically saying that her shepherd is a better moral character than Solomon. Because the upright love him right? My shepherd is better than you. My shepherd is more moral than you. And I'd rather have a kiss from my shepherd than everything you could possibly offer me. Look at down in verse 5 through 6. I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Look not upon me, because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyard have I not kept. So what does she do here? So she's sitting in the king's chambers. And all this, we're going to read through the rest of this. She's sitting in the king's chambers. Okay? And this is how she is combating the temptation that is being thrown in front of her. Okay? So she's turning around and she's going to recount many things. She's going to recount many back and forth between her and her shepherd husband. Okay? She's going to recount Solomon's big grand entry where he swooped her up and brought him with her. She's going to recount a lot of things. One of the things, though, that she's here, as she's sitting in the midst of this, and she starts saying, you know, I long for just a kiss from my husband, my shepherd. I wish he would just draw me, just extract me from this situation that I am in. Then she starts doing a little introspection here. And she says, I am black but comely. O ye daughters of as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Look not upon me, because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. Now, many people read this and come up with some funny old things. Okay? But what it literally is talking about here is she is from the Middle East, is she not? She has that olive skin complexion. What happens to people with an olive skin complexion when they spend a lot of time out in the sun? They get darker, don't they? And what it indicates is that she has to work outside. Because if she was one of those posh little girls who got to stay inside all the time, she would be paler, wouldn't she? Okay? So when they reference to the fact that their skin was so dark, okay, it meant that they didn't have a very posh lifestyle, that they were out in the sun. In fact, she even tells us what she was doing out there. What was she doing? What was her occupation? She was keeping a vineyard, wasn't she? That was her job. She was outside all day long, keeping a vineyard. And she even tells us who basically put her in this type of outdoor manual labor. Who was it? Her brothers and sisters. Her brothers and sisters got angry with her for some reason. So you know what they did? They stuck her out in the vineyard. So all day long, she's out in the vineyard. She's tending the vineyard. So her natural Mediterranean complexion goes dark. My beloved wife has that Mediterranean olive skin complexion. And when she stays out in the sun too long, you know what happens? She goes dark. She worked in a cornfield, detasseling corn. Okay? So all summer long, or all that season, she's out detasseling corn. And she went, to borrow the old southern Tennessee guy's expression, brown as a ginger cake. Now, I'll tell you what will happen to me. I'd be red as a lobster. Properly steamed. I don't go brown. I go red. It is just not my thing. And out in the sun all the time. But my ancestors come from a cloudy country, where we don't need all that browning in our skin because we don't get that much sunlight anyway. And so I'm not going to go into all that. But nevertheless, this is what she's talking about here. She goes, I've been forced to do this menial labor. I've been forced to do what my brothers and sisters don't want to do, what is considered beneath us. Obviously, it's their vineyard, right? But they don't want to hire service. They're so angry with her that they're going to put her out into the vineyard all day long. And because she's out in the vineyard all day long, she's gotten dark. Okay, so look what she says there. Look not upon me. Why? Because it was not considered an attractive look. Okay, so look not upon me because I'm black, because the sun hath looked upon me. And then she tells us why. Her mother's children were angry with her and made her the keeper of the vineyards. Okay? But again, she goes, my own vineyard have I not kept. Okay? So she's being punished by her siblings. The result of this has a cosmetic effect, if you will, upon her, because now she's not that, according to her own self, she's not that good looking. Okay? Because her skin's so dark. Because she's been out in the sun so long. Okay? Now again, a lot of these expressions, if they're going to come up on here, they're going to make a lot of sense to us Occidental minds. You know? But to them, it was a thing. Okay? To them, it was a major thing when a Shulamite went dark. When this girl went dark, she wasn't attractive. So she was willing to look at herself and go, here are my faults. Isn't it amazing? So she's sitting in the king's chambers and she's bragging on her shepherd and saying how much she desired her shepherd. Then she starts looking at herself and says, I'm not that big of a catch. Okay? I'm not that great of a catch. In fact, I'm not even liked by my own family. Okay, this is how bad it is. Not only do I not look good, but my family doesn't even like me. They're so angry with me that they've cast me out into the vineyard, and that's the work that I do. I'm not a part of the governing class in my own household. I'm stuck out in the vineyard like a servant. And you can tell because just look at my skin. This is how bad it is for me. I'm not physically attractive, according to her. Okay? I'm not socially attractive. Okay? According to her. And so she puts forth this almost condemnation of herself. But then she goes on to verse 7. Tell me, O thou whom my soul loveth, where thou feedest, where thou makest thy flock to rest at noon. For why should I be as one that turneth aside by the flocks of thy companies? So look what she's doing. And this is how I know Solomon is not the shepherd. Because she's with Solomon. But what information is she ending this with? What's she looking for? Where's the shepherd? Where are you grazing your flocks? Where do you have your flocks at? Tell me, because I don't want to accidentally turn aside and go somebody else's flock. That's what she's saying. I don't want to end up in the wrong camp. Where are your flocks? She didn't know where they were. Okay? She's taking care of a vineyard. Suddenly, here comes Solomon. Somehow, he comes in, he finds her, he swoops her up, takes her back to his chamber. Now she's sitting in the chamber. And don't worry, Solomon didn't care that her skin was dark. He married women of all kinds of different stripes and colors and shapes. Okay? When you have 1,000 wives, you can't be too picky. And in order to get that many, you've got to take them from all stripes, colors. That's not the problem. But she's looking at it. And obviously, it wasn't a problem for the shepherd. He didn't care. She's looking at it and saying, this is problematic. I'm not pretty. I don't have a position in society that is desirable, you know. But she had one amazing thing. She loved that shepherd. And all the wealth in the world couldn't dissuade her from loving that shepherd. Now, understand this though, okay? Because here's where modern psychologists, psychiatrists, and therapists don't get. Shepherd wasn't around. He was out in the fields with the flocks, and she didn't even know where he was at. He wasn't there to defend her against Solomon, who swooped in and picked her up. He wasn't there. He was gone. She was on her own. I mean, this shepherd boy was failing every marriage retreat he'd ever gone to. He wasn't around. He gave her no look, this was all on her. She resisted the temptation on her own. It wasn't making a choice, the shepherd's over here trying to entice her and Solomon's over here trying to entice her. No, shepherd wasn't doing anything to secure her affections. I'm talking about physically right there. She was on her own, in the king's chambers. And do you know what else would have been in the king's chambers? His other wives and concubines. Historians think at the time of the writing of this, he had about 80. We know where he ends up. But the writing of this, he had about 80. And guess what? They probably all wanted to be there. So not only was she in a position that he was trying, but she had a lot of pressure to go another direction. She could have just fallen in line with all the other wives and concubines, right? But what does she do? No, my shepherd. I want my shepherd. Where's my shepherd? I want to be with my shepherd. I want my shepherd to kiss me. I don't want Solomon's kisses. I want my shepherd's kisses. This is what I want. Now, there's a great lesson here, because true marital devotion doesn't depend upon the other person that you're married to. It's on you. You decide to be devoted. You decide to be faithful and loyal. You don't depend upon the other person. I've counseled a lot of young people, and I've told them over and over again, you do not find the right one. You become the right one. You see, in the days of this time, now Solomon being, and David's family being the exception here, but then look at the quality of their marriages and their families. You trained up a child in the way they should go. We usually misinterpret it. Really, you're training them up to get married. You're training a little girl to be a wife. You're training a little boy to be a husband. You're training them to be what they should be. And this is why they could prearrange marriages, because it didn't matter. Because whoever you married, you are going to be a good husband to. To whoever you married, you are going to be a good wife to. Take the instance of Abigail. I've got that name pronounced right. David's like, I don't know what number wife. She ends up being his number wife. But her husband was a son of Belial, right? He was a horrible man. Okay? David's men protected his interests when they were out in the fields. Okay? David didn't do anything for free, so he expected payment. I know a lot of preachers that will hate me right now because I'm bashing on David, but I'm just being honest. He was a human being, and these were his faults. These were his sins. Okay? I still declare God said he was a man after his own heart, but I know why. Because what ticked God off about Saul? Saul wasn't a polygamist. And you don't find any problems with Saul's sons being polygamists. But Saul blasphemed. And God says, no. We're done. David come along, and David was horrible when it came to his marriages. Okay? And in fact, his first wife was Saul's daughter. Right? But he was horrible about this. Okay? But you know the one thing he did, he always surrendered to? Correction. Though he was morally corrupt, spiritually, he understood where his bread was buttered. He knew what he never attempted the things that, even though Saul morally was a decent man, but spiritually he was corrupt. David spiritually was a good man, but morally he was corrupt. You say that doesn't make any sense. Sure it does, because we're all sinners in need of a Savior. Okay, it's pride that says, "Well, I'd never do that." Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Don't say you will never do that. That is pride. You've already fallen. You've already taken the step toward that and probably worse things, because you're so self-confident that you'd never do that. Don't do that. Be like the Shulamite. I'm black and uncomely. Her personal opinion of herself was low. But her opinion of her shepherd, he was impeccable. Even though, think about it, he wasn't even there. He left her on her own, her family. She wasn't living, think about it, she wasn't living with the shepherd. She was still living with her family, though she was married to the shepherd. He's gone all the time because he's out in the fields with the sheep. Her family's angry. She doesn't say why. Family's angry with her, and She's made to go out and tend the vineyard. She's a married woman. She should be running her own house. She's, when you really look at it, she's not being given what we would call a very good deal here. But she ain't breaking that love for that shepherd. And you say, but why? Why? Look, she's got this incredible opportunity. Solomon will make this okay. If she wants Solomon over the shepherd, he'll make it okay. He has the means and the influence and the wisdom on how to make this okay. She could go from having to tend a vineyard with an absent husband to being one of Solomon's many wives, concubines, living indoors, being pampered. She'd rather have the shepherd and the vineyard and that whole life than what Solomon's offering her. That is amazing. But that is a choice she's making. There's no external stimuli enticing her that way. This is her personal choice. And I just want to say that, if you really want to straighten up society, let's get back to making it. It's called soul liberty. Every one of us will give an account of himself before God. But I can't also help as I look through this and see this amazing imagery of the church in Christ. And I'll even say this, I'll even make Solomon Caesar, just so I can alliterate everything. Shulamite, the shepherd, Solomon, the church, Christ, and Caesar. Also, see, I did good. My homiletics teacher will be so proud of me. And they also knew that I'd say that when I got up here and did that. I did. I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get up there, and then I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to be so proud of myself for saying that, for figuring out this thing. But, hold on. Thing went to sleep. Here we go. So, what a beautiful picture this is. Because you have the church, okay? And we're left in a world that at one point is not hospitable to us, right? And then we have the temptations of worldly power and influence. And our husband is not here physically, is he? He isn't. I understand the Spirit of Christ. I understand. But physically, he's not here, is he? Physically, though he's made a lot of promises to us, you're going to rule and reign with me. And he's made a lot of promises, but are we ruling and reigning? Are we in charge? Are we making the decision? No. In fact, if anything, we're hated and we're cast out. We're social pariahs because we name the name of Christ. And because we choose to stay devoted to him. And let me tell you something, this too, get ready for it. The more you brag on Christ, the more of a pariah you'll become. See, Caesar doesn't mind you being religious. The community doesn't mind you being religious. What they mind is Jesus. Remember, Jesus said that they actually don't hate you. They hate me. But if you do what he asks you to do, which is lift him up, which is brag on him, which is proclaim him, which is to say, I'd rather have Jesus than worldly applause. I'd rather have him. And I can't think of all the other verses. But if you sing, you know what I'm saying? That you'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. When you take that attitude and you proclaim that attitude, don't expect Caesar and the community to like you. And you can even say, but I'm an American. What are you talking about? I'm part of this country. No, you will not be. Because the world is at enmity with God. You understand? Not you and me. They're not at enmity with us. Okay? They're at enmity with God. And the reason they treat us the way they treat us and they dislike us, so if you truly make your shepherd the number one thing in your world, even though they'll point out, look what he's done. You trusted him and all you've got is health problems. You've trusted him and all you've got is financial problems. You've trusted him and all you've got is family problems. You've trusted him and you just got problem after problem after problem. You keep, nothing goes well for you. Right? And then you start singing his praises. You know what? I would rather have Jesus and my health fail and my finances fail and my family forsake me and I have no prospects in this world. I would rather have Jesus. That irritates them. It just does. You know why? Because they're being led by the spirit of Antichrist and they're filled with the spirit of disobedience. And so when you turn around and you promote the Christ and obedience to the Christ, you are going to irritate them. To the point, remember when Stephen preached? This was some of the most amazing things to me. They gnashed on him with their teeth. You do realize what that means, right? They were biting him. They were so angry with him that they literally just, they were biting him like a pack of wild dogs because they were so angry. But at Stephen, they were angry. They hated his shepherd. They took it out on him, but it was the shepherd they were angry at. And you know what it is? Let me tell you the same thing that Pilate observed when the high priests brought Jesus before him. It wasn't that Jesus did anything wrong or that Jesus was worthy of anything, especially death. He recognized, what was it? They were jealous. They were jealous. They were jealous of the influence and the attraction Jesus had to the people that they didn't have. It was pure jealousy. It was literally lovers, rivals. Because they couldn't have the devotion and love that Jesus was inspiring. They wanted to they did. They wanted him destroyed. And any reminder, remember every time the disciples preached and stuff like that, what was the scare they had? They're going to bring this man's blood on us. Stop talking about Jesus. Stop it. They beat him. Throw him in prison. To do what? To shut him up. Stop talking about Jesus. We don't want to hear this about Jesus anymore. We're done with him. Oh, it's just starting. Because just like this Shulamite, you can put her in the middle of all the trappings and it means nothing to her. Now, she doesn't have a very good opinion of herself. And that's a good lesson for us too. Let's never forget how undesirable we really are. I mean, sometimes you hear this preaching like, well, Jesus died for you, so you must be really special and important. And all of a sudden, you're like, yeah, I am. Think of how important I am that Jesus would die for me. What a catch I am that Jesus would die for me. Isn't that how a lot of times you hear it preached? And then they'll change the words of hymns. I remember one time I was listening to, there's a line where the hymn goes, for such a worm as I. And then all of a sudden I heard this other group sing it, for such a one as I. No, the hymn writer said worm. Do you know why? Because the hymn writer knew he was black and uncomely. He knew there was nothing good about him, and there was no reason for Jesus to want to save him. He knew it. And that was his opinion of himself. And that was his opinion, really, because he wrote the hymn for everybody to sing that everybody should have. We're worms. We're not worthy of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. We're not worthy of his blood. He got nothing when he got us. Because think about it, he saved us. And you'd think, with all that he did when we trusted him, you think now we'd be loyal, good little boys and girls, wouldn't we? But now he has to ever live to make intercession for us. So what did he get when he got us? More trouble. Because not only does he have to save us, then he has to intercede for us the whole time. Because even after recognizing our unworthiness and the incredible sacrifice he made and the gift of eternal life and how unworthy we are of that and accepting him as our Savior, you would think that we would take advantage of this new life in Christ. But the reality is we have to have a chastising spirit to constantly correct us, right? He has to constantly make intercession for us, because even after redeeming us, even after satisfying the wrath of God against us, he has to continually work on our relationship because we are that bad. It isn't because his salvation is not perfect and powerful. It's because we're that bad. And I think sometimes what we do when the Solomons of our world swoop in and take us and set us in their chambers and show us what they can offer us, and then they brag on us, and they build up our ego, and they build up our self-confidence, and they build us our self-worth, and suddenly we forget we're black and comely and uncomely. We're not desirable. But then again, think of who's telling you you are. It's like one skunk telling another skunk, man, you smell great. Isn't it? It's like one pig telling another pig, man, that mud looks good on you. I think you look great with all that mud and slop and nastiness over you. We were sitting at a place we called, what was it called? But what we called it when we went to Haiti, we called it Pig Beach. And the reason we call it Pig Beach, well, the guy we went to go preach with every year had multiple places, ministries. In this one little fishing village, he set up a school, okay? Because there's no public schools over there. It's all private. Somebody has to privately fund it. So he set up this little school. It's amazing work. I really wish sometimes we could go there. It was the most amazing place to go to this man's work. But I think at this particular point, you wouldn't see what we got to see, because it's all there. It's all up, working, paid for, doing well. We got there when it was nothing, just an idea, just an effort. And then we watched it year after year go from that to, oh my goodness. And it was amazing to see that. But unfortunately, like I said, I don't think. But anyway, in this fishing village, he had a school right up on the beach, and there was a wall that separated it. You got a gate, and you could go to the beach and the ocean there. But we called it, I dubbed it Pig Beach, because when I first went there, when it was just a shack, it wasn't a school, it was a shack, and he had services there on Sunday afternoon. It was just a shack. And he had a feeding station once a day. He'd feed the children in the neighborhood there. And some of them was the only meal they got. And every day he would go out there, and they just got beans and rice. Beans and rice and a little vitamin. But remember going out there? The sad thing was sometimes you'd go there, and these kids would just come. Some of them weren't even clothed. It was the most amazing thing. But it did such a work on your heart. Anyway, now it's a fancy school. It went from a feeding station to a fancy school, and the same kids that were showing up naked to the feeding station are in uniforms going to school in the same building. It is the work of God. It is a perfect picture of God taking us out of the muck and making something out of us for his name's sake. It was the most amazing thing. But we'd go back, and I walked out the door the first time. And there is no real sanitation system there. And so this water is as black as tar, and it goes out far, far away. They gotta sail their boats way out there to find fresh water and fish. And it's a rocky beach, and it looks like the Exxon oil spill. I mean, these rocks are covered in, and it stinks. Wow, it stinks. It's refuse. It's human and animal refuse just being dumped in the ocean, and it's just washed. It's nasty. Oh, the smell will knock you down. It's so bad. But I went out there one of the years we were there. I went out. We always go to this station at least once, twice, every day, as many times as we could. And then I'd always take them out back the gate to see what I called Pig Beach. And the reason is because there's pigs everywhere. Just pigs standing out in the water, pigs. And one day I took this friend of mine from Wyoming, very much a cowboy type guy, really the genuine article. So not just a clothing that he wore, but he really had a ranch, horses. But anyway, so you can out there, and this pig is standing out there, several of them, and they're just standing there. And this one pig looks down, and he muzzles into the water and comes up with something, and just starts munching down on it. He goes, "Oh, I don't even want to think of what that pig just found to eat." But the other pigs had no problem with it. Because they're pigs. That's perfectly fine. Find something floating in nasty water and eat it. That's what pigs do. Okay? No big deal. So when a bunch of sinners get together and say, "You're not that bad. You're pretty..." What is that? It's a sinner telling another sinner, "You're not that bad." It's like a pig. I mean, that's not affirmation. Okay? That's just two people both down in the muck and trying to convince each other they're not down in the muck, or there's nothing wrong with them being in the muck. But as we stood there down the beach, we saw this little figure, little girl, naked as the day she was born, standing in the water. She reaches down into the water. She pulls up this little outfit. She puts it on and come over. She was a good block or two down, but she comes running up to us with this filthy little garment. And it was just heartbreaking. Just utterly, utterly heartbreaking. You see, two pigs sitting around in the slop are going to encourage each other because but all of a sudden people see a person sitting in that slop, and guess what we do? No, this is not right. Christ looks down and says, "That ain't right. You're married to the shepherd. It doesn't matter if Solomon tells you this is okay. You're married to the shepherd. And you've got to stay loyal to the shepherd regardless of what Solomon says. Because you're the Shulamite married to the shepherd. You've got to stay loyal to the shepherd regardless of what your family says. So they hate you. So they put you out in the vineyard. It doesn't matter what you go. You have to stay loyal to the shepherd." And so likewise, here we are, okay, in that Shulamite's position. And every day, the Solomons, the Satans of the world come to us and offer us their wares. They offer us success according to their standards, morality according to their standards, right? Justification, righteousness, everything according to these, really, let's just be honest with it, satanic standards. And you know what they can tell you? They tell you, "Don't worry about it. We'll make this okay. We'll make this okay." Don't you know? And here's what nobody talks about anymore. Don't you know we have enough tear Christians to make you look normal? If you forsake your shepherd, there are enough tares out here that claim to be Christians that you'll fit right in. You'll never feel guilty. Because you have all these people around you who claim to love Jesus, and you can just fit right in with them. But in the end, they don't really love Jesus. Okay? They say they do, but they don't. Because remember one of Jesus' big prophecies about the end time? The tares. And remember what he said, I'm not taking the tares out. I'm going to leave them there. You know, almost like he did in the garden when he put all these wonderful things and then put a tree in there that could cause our downfall. Right? Why do that? People ask all the time, why did he do that? Because love isn't love until it's tested. Until you have the opportunity to transmit your love to something else, you don't know that you really love the thing. You say, I love it. I love this. You know, reminds me when I was a kid, there were 2 competing television shows on. Here we go, my pop culture for the day. And the 2 competing television shows, you probably remember, one was called Blue Thunder and one was called Airwolf. Remember the 2? Remember the helicopter shows, right? Okay. And, well, in my household, we watched Airwolf. Okay. Airwolf, man, we loved Airwolf, Jan Michael Vincent and all those. Well, he was a pothead, but the helicopter was so slick, man. Do you know, it's an amazing story. I'm going to give you some pop culture. When that show was canceled, that helicopter was turned into a fire and rescue service helicopter and rescued people and took them to hospitals and did that. That's how it ended its life. It didn't have a life, but that's how it ended. Now it's junk and doesn't exist anymore. But it came off that show and started really rescuing people. It's a pretty amazing thing. Didn't happen to Blue Thunder, but anyway, Airwolf was genuinely a hero. Okay, but there. But you had these 2 competing shows, and here's the funny thing about it. So, my cousin's house, it was Blue Thunder. In fact, they never watched Airwolf. Now, I had watched it, Blue Thunder. I knew what it was like. Didn't care for it. So I'm over at my cousin's house, and it's that night. Okay, Blue Thunder was on at the same time as Airwolf. I mean, it was 2 networks competing with the same kind of idea of a souped-up helicopter. Okay. And I convinced, my cousin loved Blue Thunder. He bragged about Blue Thunder. Oh, this is Blue Thunder. It's the greatest thing. I'm loved. So I like Airwolf. I've seen both of them, and I'd rather have Airwolf, you know, and back and forth. But I finally convinced him to watch Airwolf. Okay. I can't believe this is going to be. I finally convinced him to watch Airwolf. So he watched Airwolf. You know what? He was a diehard Airwolf fan after that. You know what? He really didn't love Blue Thunder. All the braggadocious, how much it was the better helicopter. One episode, and he never watched another episode of Blue Thunder again. He didn't really love Blue Thunder. I know it's a silly little illustration, but you never really know your love until you're tested. So God says, here's a tree, don't eat it. Let's see where your love's at. And God says, tares and wheats. I'm not going to remove the tares. Because I want to see if you really love me. And you know what? The amazing thing is, it isn't so much that God doesn't already know. You know who really needs to see it? We do. Adam, where art thou? Like God didn't know. Adam needed to open his mouth and confess that he wasn't where he was supposed to be. And he didn't do what God... In other words, he had to confess, you really don't love me, do you? You know the amazing thing about God? He knows that. He knows how fickle our love is. Right? He does. He knows. Very rarely has he found people that he'd be willing to let the devil tempt. You can think of one, can't you? Job. Right? And what was the devil's reply? And by the way, the devil's reply to God about Job wasn't based upon the devil just kind of pie in the sky making things up. He had been walking to and fro in the earth. He had scientific data to back up his next claim. Oh, sure, Job loves you because you put a hedge of protection about him. You made him rich and healthy and prosperous, and people love him and respect him. Take it away and he'll curse you to your face. That was based on scientific data. Man only loves you because you were good to him. Stop being good to him and watch him curse it to your face. I'm actually quite thankful God has never looked down at the devil and said, "Have you thou considered my servant Vernon?" I don't want to really be in that situation. Job didn't make it out too good at the end, but he probably made it out a lot better than I would have. That's just being honest with yourself and saying, I am black and uncomely. Keep yourself, as one old preacher said, he's everything, and I'm nothing. And the reason why it was so easy for the Shulamite, I think, one of the reasons why she was so, because she never thought much of herself anyway. I'm not worthy of this. I'm not a catch. Don't lie to me. This is fake. How can I be that special when I'll just be number 81? There's no way this man Solomon really cares about me when he's got 80 spares. I am not that special. I'm just his next thrill. But then Michael was his first. And look what happened to her. This is not the greatest family to marry into. Horrible track record. No, not in the biblical sense. Not at all. This is not what God intended at all. No. He was Solomon. Did he need it? No, he didn't. He was a king. All he had to do is drive his chariots through and say, "Hey, baby, up in my chariot, let's go." Because a concubine wasn't a legally married wife. She had no rights. And bad enough if you're one of 300 wives. That's still humiliating, in my opinion. If I were a woman, I would be absolutely humiliated. Although I have seen programs where they go up into those areas up in Utah, and where they used to have polygamous cults, and they talk to some of the women in the town, and they're crazy. They want to be in those polygamous marriages. Women do. I've never understood that. I understand a man's motivation to be a Mormon, but I've never understood a woman's motivation to be a Mormon. In the Mormon belief, he gets to choose if he resurrects or not on Judgment Day. And it's all based on what he wants. I don't understand why a woman would ever want to be a Mormon. I don't understand why a woman would want to be one of many wives. I don't understand that. And I'm a man. And I still, because isn't that humiliating? I would think it would be, personally. And can I tell you something, church? That's all the world thinks of you. You're just one more conquest. If they manage to pull you their direction, it isn't because you're so special. You're just one more thrill. One more way they can do this at night. The devil doesn't care about us. It's just that every victory he gets, he can go to God. I know it's radio, right? You can't see what I'm doing. I am lifting my hand toward the heavens and shaking it. And actually, I'm lifting it toward the tile roof. But that is true. Isn't that sad? What's our lesson then today? Our lesson then today is that I want you to understand that she made these decisions to be loyal. It was her understanding of her devotion to her shepherd that has created this book. Because she is in the midst of worldly temptation, and her response is to brag about something that in comparison is nothing. There is no tangible comparison between all that Solomon is offering and what this shepherd can offer. He's not even there. He's out in the field. She doesn't even know where he's at. It doesn't make any difference. Now, in our culture, that doesn't make any sense. We would go, well, it's understandable if she's disloyal to him. Think about the fact that, hey, we would be okay in our culture with what she broke here. Join the other 80. Right? You'd say, well, shepherd's fault. Should have been around more. Should have paid more attention to her. Should have. Whoa. That's not what marriage is about. Marriage is a decision. It's a commitment. The Shulamite was committed to her shepherd. And it didn't matter what Solomon had to offer. The shepherd was more important. I think personally we need to take note of that. I think as a church we need to take note of that. That the shepherd is more important. Nothing the world offers even compares to him. Nothing compares to him. Well, how do I fight off the temptation? Start bragging about him. You won't have to worry about it. Doesn't it say that they forsook us? When Paul was writing, they forsook us. They separate themselves from us. Why? Because someone who is in love with the world is not in love with Jesus. And the world is at enmity with God. And thus, if you are in love with the world, you will go out from us because you are not of us. It really comes down to that level of love and devotion. What is the greatest commandment? To love God with some of your soul, some of your mind, some of your heart, some of your strength, or what? All of it. You can't do that and love the world too. But the world demands that same level of love. They're jealous, just like the Jews. They're jealous of the fact that we're more in love with him than we are with them. To the point where, just like he says, if you don't love me more than your father or mother or brother or sister, right, then you're not worthy of me. He's not telling you not to love them. But he's saying, in comparison, if you don't love me more, then you're not worthy of me. Now, that's just God basically making a statement, a fact. How can you compare me to your mother and father? How can you compare me to an earthly king? How can you compare me to anybody else in your life? There's no. If a human being did that, he'd be a narcissist. I understand that. But God is just telling the truth. There is nothing that compares to him. And therefore, it is illogical, it is irrational to love anything on an equal basis with him, let alone more than him. Because there's nothing to compare to him. And this is our takeaway this morning. And this is going to be our launching pad for the rest of the book. Is this unbelievable love that this Shulamite displays. She's not perfect. Okay? She does some really stupid things. But in her defense, she's just so in love with this shepherd that sometimes she loses her common sense because she's just so in love. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for this opening of the book. And I pray now, Father, that you will help us as we study this book. May our love for you deepen. And not only may it be deeper, may it be louder. So that like the Shulamite, we become an irritation to those around us. Let's ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's sing our